everyone, it's Sheila. It's Thursday tip night. Tonight I'm going to talk to you about thread and what kind of thread I use and why I like it. A lot of people will use Coats and Clark thread. It's a cotton thread. You can buy it at Joann's, a lot of places. Probably Walmart, I'm not sure, but I think. And this is similar to Coats and Clark. It's a cotton thread. It's very thick and it's also very linty. So you need to clean your sewing machine often if you use Coats and Clark thread. It's not my favorite. I never use it. It's very thick, very linty. I have to clean my machine all the time. So I am not a fan of Coats and Clark thread. I would rather spend a little bit money and get a thread that's easy to use. My machine likes it and it doesn't cause lint. So on my long arm, I use So Fine thread. So Fine thread. And it's a polyester thread. It's 50 weight. And that's what it looks like. This is the top of it, So Fine. And I use this on my long arm. That's what I came with my long arm from the shop I bought my long arm from. My machine likes it. It's polyester, so it's not linty. I don't have to mess with my tension much. If you are starting out on your long arm, stay with one thread. If you like glide thread, which is a polyester, it's a shiny thread. To me, I do not like the shininess. It would depend on what I'm working on, but I normally like the doll thread, like the So Fine. But stick to one thread. If you're using glide thread, use it until you get really comfortable with it with your machine. If you're using So Fine, use it and just until you're really comfortable with your machine. If you switch back and forth different threads, you have to mess with the tension. And if you stay with one thread, once you get the tension set, it's pretty good. You don't have to mess with it too much. And tension issues on a long arm is a big headache. So my favorite is So Fine. I also use So Fine. I put it on a spool holder, a cone holder, and I use it on my sewing machine, my regular domestic machine, for piecing my blocks. And it comes in a huge variety of colors. So Fine is my go-to thread most of the time. For piecing, I was an Aurifil person for a while. I like Aurifil. It's a little on the expensive side. It is a cotton thread, and it's a 50 weight. If it comes on the orange spool, that's 50 weight. This is what the spool looks like. I'll show you. I'm not sure if the zoom is, if you can read it or not. I'll show you in a little bit. But it's a nice thread. Even though it's a cotton, it's smoother and not as linty as Coats and Clark. And there's a lot of thread on a spool. So that's a nice thread to piece with. And I do piece with this often too. For my applique, when I am doing English paper piecing, I use Invisifil. It's made by Wonderfil. And it's 100 weight, which is very thin. This is the weight. It's very, very thin. And I'll show you on this white fabric. But I use this celery color a lot. You don't need a lot of colors on this because the thread is so thin, it goes right into the fabric. It just blends in and mushes down in there, and you don't see the stitches. I've tried ripping it out. I can't see the stitches to rip it out. And a tip I have for you, it's very thin, so you don't see it when you're hand stitching. And I hand stitch my English paper piecing with a single thread. And the tip I have for you with that is to make a knot up by your needle. Because if you've ever hand stitched, and you make your knot at the end of your thread and you go to stitch and you pull it through your fabric and the knot comes right through with the needle. And then you're like, oh, I need a bigger knot. So you knot it again a few times and then try to lock your stitch there so that a knot doesn't pull through. So if you tie a little knot up by your needle, that knot will pull through your fabric, but yet if you drop your thread or your needle, you're not going to lose your needle off your thread. And it's very convenient. It's a great tip. I've got that from Annette Williams that has Sewing the Good Life. I like her patterns, and that's one of the tips that she gave me early on, and I use it all the time. But I'm going to lay these threads down here on this white fabric so you can see the difference in the thicknesses of the thread. And the only one that I really do not like is the cotton Coats and Clark thread. It's just so linty and it's thick and there's little fuzzies on it. It's just not a nice thread. If you're going to put all that effort into making your quilt, then you want to use quality material, quality fabric, quality thread, and make your life easy, because some threads knot more than others. The Invisifil hardly ever knots. But let me stop this and I'll give you a close-up of this. Like on white fabric. This is my Invisifil thread. This is what the spool looks like. The top of the spool, there we go. It's 2,500 meters. It's a polyester. It's 100 weight, and it's very thin. It's not linty. It's very smooth. It's great for appliquing your pieces onto your background fabric. It's also great for sewing your pieces together if you're doing English paper piecing. The next thread I have is the Aurifil. It's a little thicker if you see the two together. This is a 50 weight. And this is what the end of the spool looks like. Aurifil, 100% cotton. It's not as linty as the Coats and Clark. If you see, it's a very smooth thread. But it's a little bit linty, but it's nice to sew with. It's a good quality thread. And I use it for piecing on my domestic machine. I also use Sew Fine thread. So here's the Sew Fine. Here's the three together now. This bottom one is my Sew Fine thread. And this is what the top of the spool looks like. It's a 50 weight. And there's, on that large cone like this, there's 3,280 yards, and it's a polyester. So of these three, this is the 100 weight. The bigger the number, the thinner the thread. So this is the 100 weight, this is 50 weight, and this is 50 weight. This one's cotton, this one's polyester. The Sew Fine polyester is what I use in my Longarm, and it's also what I use to piece with. A lot of times I'll put my large cone onto a cone holder and use it on my domestic machine. And the bottom one is the Coats and Clark type thread. It's a cheaper thread. It's really fuzzy. I'm trying to get it there. It's really fuzzy. You can even see on the spool it looks really thick. And it makes a lot of lint. And I just don't like having all that lint flying everywhere. So I do not use a Coats and Clark thread. I would suggest you use either Sew Fine, Wonderfil Invisifil, or Aurifil to piece with. The Invisifil would only be piecing if you're hand appliquing or machine appliquing, not for piecing your blocks by machine. But that's my suggestions on thread, and I hope this helps you. See you next Thursday. Bye.